And good to see everyone. I'm sorry not to be there. As you know, I've been involved with the Alliance since the beginning. I've been to many of the events, but I guess part of leaving a legacy is not spreading my germs. I got a bug when I was on the road last week, and I decided I would stay home. So one thing that's interesting about this is I cannot see any of you, but you can see me, and it's fun to be here. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. It's an interesting dynamic right now because I cannot see or hear anything, but hopefully everything is going okay on your end. I was hoping to be there. I picked up a bug last week at another conference I was speaking at, so I thought it'd be better to stay home. Anyway, at the ripe old age of 50 years old, I have been asked to write a presentation about leaving a legacy. I love a challenge, as many of you know, and so I was happy to do it. I haven't done this presentation before, but I put together about 30 slides. First, I want to tell you a little bit about me and my team and my background, and then what I think it means to leave a legacy. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought you really need to break it down into points. So that's what I've done. I've got 7 points, 7 pages. And then I asked a couple of people who have been very important to me in my career, including my colleague Andrea, to share a couple of minutes about their perspective on leaving a legacy. So towards the end, they'll join us as well. So I have been working for 30 years, 3 decades, always in investment banking, always in New York. I grew up in Dublin, Ireland, graduated in 1994, and was recruited by Merrill Lynch in New York City. Together, my team has over 100 years of experience in investment banking for housing companies. When you think about being an investment banker, it's quite a unique skill set. You have to understand all that's going on in the capital markets, both private and public, everything that's going on in terms of valuations, finding capital, both debt and equity. And then separate to the investment banking skill set, our expertise is housing and construction. So you also have to stay on top of all the trends there. There's really no better group to help you stay on top of the trends, what's happening, what has happened, but in particular to anticipate what's going to happen. There's no better group for us to do that than the Housing Innovation Alliance. And within our company, we only represent owners and founders of real estate companies and construction businesses. We don't work for investors, we don't work for buyers, because I only like to work on one side of a transaction. It's not possible to work on both. It's not possible to work for buyers without feeling conflicted. And so I like to keep my business simple. That's important to me. We don't invest in deals because we don't want to compete with our clients. Over the last 5 years since I started this business actively, we have closed 25 transactions for about $13 billion in total volume. Some of the largest private home builder sales, for example, Castle Rock in Texas. We've closed 5 transactions on behalf of our clients with the Japanese buyers, which are great advocate for our industry and hopefully going to bring some change. So the course of my career started in 1994 when I was recruited out of undergraduate. At the time, having grown up in Ireland through the 70s, the 80s, a lot of people in America think of Ireland as this great place to visit. Half of Americans think they're actually Irish, especially around St. Patrick's Day. They really don't understand the dynamic that's over there day to day, the political uncertainty. In fact, just as an anecdote, a friend of mine is a police officer in Ireland, and when Biden was visiting last week, every single professional in the security services was engaged to protect him because they're worried about terrorist activity. So when you grow up in a country like that, through the 70s when I was born and into the 80s, we had an unemployment rate that averaged over 20%. It's just massive economic strife, and everyone is focused on being educated, being as educated as possible and getting out, which is exactly what worked for me. I was very focused on my academics. I graduated at the top of my class in university, was recruited by Merrill Lynch to go and work in an investment bank on Wall Street. No joke, my parents thought I was going to be a bank teller. That's what they told me. I kind of believed it as well. In fact, when I came over here and started working and then my family came to visit, they were quite surprised that I was not wearing a uniform and a name tag. But over the course of my career, I worked for Merrill Lynch, then for UBS for a decade, JP Morgan for about another 8 years after that. And in 2014, I started Whelan Advisory with the goal to offer a higher level of service, to really break down and explain what investment banking is, to enable our clients, folks like you all in the room, successful entrepreneurs, to get to the next stage with your business, and to do so in a very thoughtful, efficient way that enables clients to make decisions as opposed to the bankers making the decisions. I would say all of this really culminated for me 2 years ago when I got my broker-dealer license, Whelan Advisory Capital Markets. We are one of the only women-owned investment banks on Wall Street, and I feel good about that. It's not that I really like to talk about myself or my own success. I'm a very private person, but what makes me feel good about it is as a woman on Wall Street, as an immigrant working in the States, being able to prove myself. There's so many people, I can't tell you how many people have said nasty things to me over the course of my career. And when I look at this, I really, in my head, I kind of flip the bird to all of them, because why not? Lest you think I'm very full of myself, let me tell you a little bit about my personal dynamic. This is my husband with his wonderful attitude and our 4 beautiful children. When you have a career like mine, you don't get to have a lot of balance in your life. You tend to spend an awful lot of time in chapters, working extensively. Investment banking is really dog ears. You just work so much, 100 hours a week, most week, pulling all-nighters. It's really why I left and started my own firm, so I could control that a little bit more. I was grateful to meet Joe in 2007, about 15 years ago. We got a late start with our family, but we're efficient, and we have a lot of fun as a family. Apparently not very good at taking photos, but I think as you hear about the story and leaving a legacy, what's really important is to realize that, as my friend Gene Myers, who might be in the room with you, I saw him there this morning, likes to say, life can be very messy and things don't always work out the way you want. If there was anything that I could change in my life today, it would be that I would have met Joe earlier, would have had my children when I was younger, just because I enjoy them so much. But it's all good, and I'm grateful for the flexibility that I have right now, including having a family foundation that we leverage, my husband and I, with our children to give back. So one of the things I like to do when I'm trying to think about a new topic, for example, leaving a legacy, is just to read about it. I'm a very curious person. I read a ton. And you can just Google, what does it mean? What do you want to be remembered for, to leave a legacy? More than half of the references are about being dead. I'm grateful I get to do it while I'm alive. But I think for me, what it means is enabling people. So teaching someone to fish versus giving them a fish, leaving something in people versus for them. That's what it comes down to for me. And because of that, I thought I would do some research on how to really do it. So break it down, because otherwise it's going to feel really overwhelming. And like most things in life, you take baby steps and then you lead up to big steps. But what I want to talk about and help you all think through relative to my own career and success is, how do you discover your purpose? Where do you start? How do you figure out what's working for you or not? All about those light bulb moments. What are you really passionate and good about? Because that's where you're going to get to your X factor, where you can protect your business, your expertise, anticipate what's around the corner, really do well for your clients, protect your business, but also your profitability. As you do that, having a map of where you are versus where you want to be, recognizing a lot of things are going to change along the way, so you're going to have to be flexible with that. And then as you get to that point where you have created and you're protecting a niche within the business, then you can actually think about the next generation and giving back. And that's where I am now in my career, which is so important to me. I love this chart because I think it's really funny. There's so many people who look at me, or they look at other people who are successful and think, wow, it came so easy to them. And this is one way to think about it. The other, of course, is the iceberg. We know that icebergs are an illusion. What you see on the top is totally different to what's underneath. And it can be much, much harder than anyone imagines, but you have to just keep at it. So in terms of the 7 things, the first one is to discover your purpose. And for me, what this means is really what makes me tick. And I'm focused here on the professional environment because we all work together. And I think that once you figure out what makes you work well professionally, then you can leverage that to create value that then you can share and leave that as part of your legacy. In my mind, there are 3 ideas here that are interspersed. The one thing is, what's my capability and what am I very good at? You don't always know that at the beginning. I think it's a good idea to go to university, take as broad a education as you can. Sometimes in our business, it's architecture and engineering, it's financing, geology. It can be anything, but figure out what you're unique at and how you can leverage that to your benefit and to get ahead. Once you do that, people like me who are a little longer in the tooth, it's also important to figure out how to stay strong at what you're doing and not get too entrenched, especially in housing. A lot of like to look in the rearview mirror versus out of what's in front of us. And so from a capability perspective, there's a book I love to recommend, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. And of course, number 7 is sharpening the saw. So not only being good at something from an education perspective, but going to events like the conference this week and really understanding who your peers are, what they're doing, how you can improve what you're doing. The second thing that's really important is chemistry. We all want to be self-aware, and nobody can evaluate themselves. And so the best way to understand what makes you tick from a chemistry, a fit, personality perspective is to understand yourself. There's so many different surveys available online, whether it's the Myers-Briggs personality test. Gretchen Rubin is someone I love. She has lots of different personality tests as well. They're free. And take those and really understand, because it's important when you meet someone to know if they're going to energize you and help you feel good, whether it's a potential employee, a client, a customer, or whether they're just going to suck the life out of you. We all have those people who you meet them and your battery goes from 100 to 0. Obviously, those are the vampires we want to avoid, but they're different for all of us. So understand your own personal chemistry so that you can leverage that and find the right people you want to work with. That makes it more fun. And then the third thing, which is the most obvious one and the one where you should have no flexibility whatsoever, is integrity, having your own personal value system and then sticking to that. Once you figure all of that out, the next one is trying to figure out what are you really good at versus others, and how should you leverage that. And I think, as I said earlier, it's hard to be self-aware. So having people who can help you to think through that, taking all these tests, reading and learning as much as possible. I have a personal board of directors. So folks like my friend George Casey, John Burns, who I check in with all the time to really help me think about what I'm doing, where I want to be, where I've been, how I'm going to get there. And often it's having those conversations with smart people who know me and care about me and my success that make me think, okay, that's a real light bulb moment. The other thing that has been interesting to me over the course of my career is that there's been so much more focus recently on mental health versus physical health. When I was in college, university, really, I guess, just as a concept, people are always talking about how to train your body. No one's talking about how to train your mind, whether it's improving your professional skill set or your mental health. But in my mind, rest is just as important as work. And some of the light bulb moments really come to me actually when I'm resting or feeling rested or doing something that's relaxing for me, like sailing, for example. Once you find these role models, you find ways to relax and appreciate your time. I think the light bulb moments come to you a lot more simply. And then, of course, speaking of light bulbs, there's a lot of quotes about Thomas Edison. I don't know how many times he failed, but it's somewhere between 1,000 and 20,000 based on the quotes I saw this weekend, trying to figure out the light bulb. But, he got it, and that's what he's remembered for. The next one is unlocking your passion. So it's not just what are you good at and what really makes you tick, but when you put all of that together, what are you passionate about? What do you really want to get up and do in the morning versus what do you avoid? And what I think is so important about this concept is you see lots of successful people being successful. You don't see them when they're doing something they're not good at. So, for example, professional athletes are really good at being athletic, a particular sport, or investment bankers or housing executives, whatever it is. There's lots of stuff that they suck at. So identify what you're good at, build on that skill set, leverage relationships to find the real light bulb moments, and then really drill down on what you're passionate about. Because when you get to that, you're going to just feel more valuable, you'll be more valuable to your clients, and then you'll have more success overall. For me, there's just never been anything more important than meaningful work. I absolutely love what I do. I love the clients. I love the concept of housing and shelter. I'm so excited that we're finally talking about affirmative action, bringing new diverse thoughts and leaders into our industry, about ESG, improving the environment, and leveraging social and governance concepts to get there. But it's different for different people, and you always just have to focus on pulling that together. Going back to the concept of mental health, Harvard University, which is a university that I would never, ever have been invited to join because despite what people think, I'm not academically that smart. But the most popular class that they've ever had was about being happier. And the lecturer wrote a really good book about which I also recommend. It's just very simple concepts. But I think people who are successful, or especially when they're strong academically and they're being pushed from the very early ages, and I see this now with my young children in elementary school, but they're being so pushed to focus on academics, and that's not necessarily enough. I think if you're not happy and holistic about your approach to life, it's going to be hard to be passionate and then to give back. Okay, so if you put all of that together, you should be able to figure out what your X factor is. So you've graduated from university, you've found people around you to help you, you're focused on balancing your life, and you get all of these things together. And that, in my mind, is what's most valuable and what leads you to being able to have a legacy. Because once you differentiate yourself from others, you can create more value, you can earn more money, you can protect your balance sheet, profits, whatever it is. And then you get to a point in your life, it's an inflection point where you can actually start to give back. Instead of thinking about what you need for yourself, you can think about what you would like to give back to others. So I had put this presentation together and asked a couple of my colleagues to give me some feedback on it. And every one of them said, why don't you talk a little bit about your own X factor versus just that concept in general. And so these are 5 things that people have said to me, which may have been light bulb moments for me. But for example, I read a ton. I'm very curious. I'm never afraid to get on a plane, go to Europe, Asia, the Middle East to see housing and construction companies. I actually did that when I was 25 years old at UBS. I went to China, and I remember one of my colleagues being like, how the heck does someone like you, like this young woman in New York, just end up spending 2 weeks in the belly of China? And why did you do that? And I just said, well, why not do it? Someone needed to do it. Someone needed to understand it. But the way for me to do that was through my relationships. And it was trusting people. Not just to bring me to Asia and get the work permits and the visas and the shots and everything you need. They had Asian flu, I remember, when I was over there. So I was used to wearing masks 20 years before COVID. But building relationships with these people, they trust your integrity and your capability. You trust theirs. And then that is so important to you later in life. And if you look, I have a small but very good circle of friends personally, but also professionally. And they're all folks that have been with me for decades, and I hope will always be there as friends of mine. People tell me I go the extra mile. I do tend to get up earlier and work later than most. In fact, my first boss on Wall Street told me the way to be successful is to be here when I get here in the morning, be here when I leave at night, and have a smile on your face at all times, which, was funny. Because at the time that was what everyone was doing, but now the culture has changed so that people are working less, or supposedly working for less. We'll see what happens. The same boss used to say to me, if there's something really important, and for us in the early 90s, the way you figured out if something was important was by standing by the fax machine, because we didn't have the internet and email and all these resources available to us when I started my career. But he would say, get in front of me naked, the idea me as a 22-year-old Irish kid in New York City being like, is he serious? Is he not serious? Anyway, the good news is, as an Irish person, I guess I'm not that sensitive. In fact, usually I'm just being politically incorrect. But working for people like that taught me a lot, not being sensitive about it. Curry, my colleague, who you guys heard from this morning, tells me that I'm very transparent. I guess that is something that I've always been. People sometimes say I'm too blunt, but I like to be straightforward. I don't like to waste time. And I think people value that. They'll often call me and say, look, here's the situation. I appreciate your advice. If you ask people for advice, you have to be open to receiving it and listening and learning. Otherwise, they're not going to give you advice again. Because I'm not sensitive, I'm very open to advice, and I actually feel that has contributed to my X factor. This is a big chart. It's going to be different for all of us in terms of creating a business map. There's no straight lines, as you saw from that success chart I shared earlier. There's no straight line to success. It's much bumpier than people think, but being organized about what your value add is, what you're bringing to the table, and when and how to get there is very helpful. I also think most successful entrepreneurs and business owners that I run into, they're always trying 2 or 3 new things. So right now, a lot of home builders are trying build to rent. We don't know if it's going to work, but we're trying it. We're trying offsite solutions. We're seeing they're going to work. How do we get more of them? As we do that, we're dropping stuff that's not serving us as well. And that's really the key to being better and sharpening the saw. Of course, there's an opportunity cost. There's risk associated with trying new things, but I think there's more risk if you don't try that. I love quotes, and this is another really funny quote. It's 200 years old, but I guess it's still true that women have to work harder, improve themselves more. The good news is I really think this is changing. I really think that people are prepared to welcome minorities in a way that they were not when I started my career. It was not even considered normal for me to immigrate, and then to work in Wall Street and then to work in construction. I mean, I can't tell you how many people made stupid comments about that over the course of my career. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not a sensitive person, so I didn't care about it. But the reality is that lots people have lots of ideas to give. And we have had an awful lot of progress over the course of my career. In fact, I literally took this when I was walking down the street, and I loved it just because it made me laugh, because it's always been men at work. There's a band called Men at Work. There's music about people, men at work, but you've never really included women, and why not? And the reality is the next generation, a lot of you hopefully in the room who are younger, is you have access to so much more information than I would have had or than other people had earlier in the career. So if you're thinking about working for a company, you can go onto their website, you can see the demographic makeup of their board and decide whether or not they're really going to be open to young people, to people of color, to immigrants, to really understand what's going to change, and if you want to be a part of that. And I encourage you to find those companies. Cheryl Palmer did a great presentation at the Alliance meeting 2 years ago about love and passion, and she had just started giving it, and I had heard a few people say it was really hokey, but I actually thought it was so spot on. It's kind of love makes the world go round. What's more important than embracing people and learning from them and bringing them in? My new colleague Marcus recommended that I share this slide, and I like it. And I think it's just so important. It's so simple. The other thing I think about as I'm spending my time being an entrepreneur, focusing on what's working, what's not working. I'm always looking at something. Is this a weed or is it a seed? Is it going to grow into something? Do I need to get it out of the way? You don't always know. You're not going to know that when you start a new concept, but it's definitely worth pursuing it for long enough to find out. And in particular, you have to remember that an awful lot of what we do is going to inspire the next generation. It's not going to actually be evident to us in the short term. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with before we have the videos from a few of my friends who wanted to join us is giving back. This is one of the 7 parts of a legacy. It's something that's incredibly important to me. I think especially having come to the States alone as an immigrant with a backpack when I was 21 years old, what I find so inspiring about this organization I want to tell you about, Amber Waves, it's local to me in East Hampton, where my family and I have a home. When I was pregnant with Joey, who's 12 now, so that would be 13, 14 years ago, Katie and Amanda, who you may recognize because they're on the Barefoot Contessa show very often with Ina Garten. She's also our neighbor in East Hampton. But Katie and Amanda invited me in a small group to a fundraising lunch that they had. And as you know, when you go to a fundraiser lunch, you bring a check in an envelope because you are expecting them to put the squeeze on you. And when I get home from the lunch, my husband said, "Oh, how did it go? How much did they ask for?" And I said, "Well, it went great. I learned a lot more about the farm, but they didn't actually ask for any money." And we both laughed and said, "All right, you really need to help them." Most people who know me know I'm very good at asking for money. And that's my expertise. That's why I'm an investment banker. But I help them to set up a board of directors. I help them to go out into the community and let people know that we're a nonprofit. A lot of people did not know that. You make absolutely no margin selling tomatoes. You think it's hard to make money developing land or selling houses. These guys make more money selling t-shirts or hats than they do selling fruit and vegetables, but their passion is food. And there was no time when this was more apparent and the benefit of this farm than when we went through COVID. The Hamptons community is known for being a very wealthy enclave, but the reality is that there's only money to be made there 2 or 3 months a year. And all through the winter months and into the spring, a lot of these families that are local struggle, but especially through the pandemic. So we were able to pickle vegetables, prepare meals in the farm. John Bon Jovi contributed and helped us. It was really, it was a time when I felt so connected to my community and so grateful to be a part of it. And another time in terms of my professional community, I'm sure you're all familiar with the USLBM, a great company and organization in our industry. But I think this might have been last summer or the summer before, they asked me to speak to one of their employee resources groups, ERGs, about just being an entrepreneur, being a on being an investment banker, and we had really good conversations. And at the end, they said that we wanted you to do it twice because they wanted everyone in their group that wanted to hear it to be able to hear it live. So I said, sure. And they said, we're prepared to make a $5,000 donation to an organization of your choice. I said, well, then if I do it twice, I'm going to take 10. And they laughed, but I am good at asking for money. And I got 10 and it went straight to my farm. And so that is it, Betsy. I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I thought we would go straight to the videos.
Perfect. I think we should do that. If you're participating online and just joining us, I know we have some people who are going to be joining us for the announcement that we talked about, that we've mentioned earlier, a project that is that we're involved in that is actually giving back. It's a collaboration between a number of people who are part of the Alliance Network. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do that, had the opportunity to meet Andrea Finger before she worked with you. You brought her to Scottsdale. And I think that actually was the year that that Cheryl Palmer spoke with us. And she's amazing person. And so she wanted to share, you invited her to share a story. And then for those of you also who know Corey Boydston, just recently retired, but she really hasn't gone silent. She's helping to lead the Women in Housing Leadership Group, of which Margaret and myself are a part of. A lot of really interesting women with different backgrounds and different roles in the housing space, and a nice place to collaborate and connect on that front. But I'm going to launch Andrea's video first, and then we'll launch Corey's. And then rather than going into Q&A, I want to pull in the folks who are here in Denver in the room, so we can get that announcement going, and then maybe we'll hold any Q&A for the end. If you're live in Denver, remember to go into Slido and put hashtag HIA Summit. You can see it on the screen and the QR code in front of you in the room, and ask any questions that you have of Margaret, or of course the folks who are going to come up and give that announcement to you as well. So let's hear from Andrea first.
Hi, I want to thank Margaret for inviting me to speak with you, and thank all of you for your time and listening to this. I've known Margaret for a long time, and she asked me to speak about legacy, and we both find it a bit of a hard topic, given that we think there's still a whole lot of road ahead of us. But when I think about what my legacy may be, or legacy is in general, I think it's about finding your passion and pursuing it, and hopefully that has an impact on other people. So when I think about my passion, I think it's financial empowerment. I believe that there's real empowerment to financial knowledge. I think it's a language that enhances our communication skills. I think it gives individuals confidence in their work and their personal life. I think it gives us a voice to speak up at the table. And I think it also gives us a language and a sense of empowerment to know our own worth and to make sure that we are being valued for that worth that we are bringing. I didn't always know what I was interested in or know what I was good at necessarily. I studied pre-med in college. I was a biology major, but it wasn't always intuitive or easy in those classes for me. And I didn't really want to go into med school or be a doctor or postpone making income for the next 6 to 8 years. And so the best advice I got from a professor in a course that I was just scrounging by on told me, don't force yourself to keep working at something that's really hard. Find what you're good at, do that. And it seemed a little counterintuitive to me at the time. I don't think it fully sank in, although it did luckily sit somewhere in the back of my brain and helped influence me over my whole life. But it's really the best piece of advice that I've gotten. And hopefully one that I think is, I've passed on to others. It's hopefully one of the better pieces that I have. I started my career in investment management, and I loved that job. I loved working on the analysis of P&Ls, trying to decipher and tell the story of the business. I loved talking to entrepreneurs and company and management teams that were trying to figure out their growth story and why investors might not be buying into it. I love the interplay of psychology with how managers are making decisions and why they make those decisions, and predicting what those decision making is going to be based on their personality, and why investors and the market does what it does. But outside of the work itself, I wasn't very happy. I didn't feel well-rounded. I felt like I spent a lot of time with people who were like me, who were financial professionals, and my world felt very narrow, and that didn't sit right with me. So I took a step back and devoted a lot of my time to working with nonprofits and also to teaching. And at first it was good, because at first it just made my world bigger, which was my first goal. It exposed me to people and ideas and passions that were so outside, my own. I remember one of the groups I worked with first was in water conservation, which I knew nothing about. And they were so passionate and so dedicated, and it really inspired me. And then it became a great experience as I continued to work with it, because I found a way to take my passion of financial empowerment and bring it into these organizations. So the first way I did it with nonprofits, most nonprofits have a fee generating business, which is just like operating a company. Whether it's a farmer's market or a landscape design, or a store selling retail, home products, all these nonprofits are trying to generate fees, but very few employees at these nonprofits have any finance or accounting or business background at all. They just have passion and ideas and energy. And so I went in and started training a lot of these individuals from the CEO level down to the individual project managers on how to build a revenue model, how to budget your expenses, how to maximize your margin for this business. It's a different mindset. Like, hey, all of our profits are going to go help our clients and serve our mission. So let's try to get the most margin we can out of what we're doing here, to really have more of that impact dollars at the end of the day, and how to put together a presentation that tells this story that can be a long-term part of our mission, a long-term part of these nonprofit story, so that their board approves it and really supports it and endorses it over time. And that was incredibly valuable to me. And I think it was very useful to the teams I worked with, who had very little hands-on experience ever doing that. And I could give them kind of a customized approach to how do you tell your own story? How do you think about this in a way that you can hire some employees and have a sustainable business here? The other way I took that idea was into teaching. So I started working at the university here and teaching in the MBA program. And that was a very humbling experience. Anyone who's tried to teach anything, I'm sure understands very well that students are merciless. But it was awesome because it exposed me to a different generation. It helped me understand their perspective and their motivations and the environment that they're growing up in, but also gave me an opportunity where I could have a captive audience and I could try to impress upon them everything I thought was important in economics and personal finances and corporate finance and the housing cycle and an investment market and behavioral psychology and everything I wanted them to know to be competent individuals and people in life. And it was not an easy class. I definitely got that feedback, but for most students, it said it was the most meaningful course, not just for their careers, but for their perspectives on what they were doing in life. I had one student who was a marketing major who had a pretty seasoned senior job at a company, and she was invited to all the exec meetings, and she said she didn't speak up at them very often because they were speaking often in a language where the CFO would talk about projects, and she just didn't feel comfortable interjecting. She wasn't sure if they were talking above her. And after taking my course, she told me that she actually started speaking up in meetings because she knew when they were talking about ROI and these terms, these acronyms, that if you don't know them, you think they're so impressive, but when you know what they actually mean, you can really support your own ideas, and you can say, hey, that's BS. And you can say, this idea is better. Let me tell you why. And I was so proud and so excited when I heard that this was really going to have an impact on her career and positively for her company too. I love the work I do now. I think I see it in the same light as working with these nonprofits. It's working with management teams, entrepreneurs, really helping empower them through financial knowledge and to know what their options are, to know what their worth is, to encourage them to continue on their best path forward. I love doing that for them and with them. When I think back on the people who I valued most in my career in life, I think it's the people who recognized what I was good at, sometimes before I did, and who really supported and encouraged me on the path to pursue it. Those were the best positive influences in my life. And so I would like to try to replicate that. And I do hope I try to replicate that in the people that I interact with and that I see. So that advice the professor gave me, to find what you're good at, to work hard, be amazing. Don't waste your time pursuing something you're not good at. It's like swimming upstream. You're not going to get very far. It's not going to be very fun. It won't be fulfilling, certainly. Or you could go with your current. You could find what you're good at. You will experience so much more. You will see so much more, and you'll enjoy the whole ride. So when I think back to what my legacy may be, I hope that I help people feel empowered in their jobs and in their lives, and that I hope I encourage people to find their current.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for arranging for that story from Andrea. You didn't get a chance to see our keynote that we had yesterday afternoon, or not yesterday afternoon. These days are all blurring together. It was Tuesday, but Jonathan Fields joined us, and he's has this self-assessment called Sparketype. And I think what I get out of hearing Andrea after hearing Jonathan on Tuesday is that, part of leaving a legacy is finding what you're truly passionate about and seeing how you can use that skill set and your own passion to help other people do things that matter, whether it's in your career or it is just in your life in general. And it's inspiring to see Andrea, and I've met some other people through the Alliance who've done that as well. So thank you for coordinating getting that story with us. I want to make sure that when we're launching this last video that we have before we go to the live feed in the room, I can see the feed. I just want to make sure I'm just hollering out to you, Dennis and Terry, to get at the ready and get toward that stage, so that, because we're going to cut to you in a couple minutes, I will let you know. I'll put a sign up on the screen that lets you know we're about to go live with you. But before we do that, I'm going to pull in the final video from Corey Boydston. As I mentioned, for those of you who may know her, she was with Ashton Woods until recently. But she had some interesting things to say as well.
I'm Corey Boydston. Margaret asked me to speak to you today about leaving a legacy. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I retired from my day job at the end of 2022, and I've been thinking a lot about how I want to spend the rest of my active life. When I think about it, I think about it in terms of time, talent, and treasure. So those are sort of the three things that you really have to offer as you think about how you're going to spend your time trying to have a positive impact on people. I think my superpower, if I have one, is connecting people. And I really, really love trying to help people. My mother told me from the very beginning that being nice to people and helping people costs you nothing. And that is absolutely true. And so I try whenever I can to help people, to make a connection, to make an introduction, to be an encouragement, to be a mentor, to make a job recommendation or be a reference for somebody. I've really been very active in home building all these years, trying to connect women in our industry because there have been so few of us. And so I never had any mentors or anybody ahead of me that was female that I could talk to or look up to or mirror or anything else. So I've really tried to create an environment for women to be able to have those things going forward that I really never had. And it's been a very gratifying experience to me. Back to the time, talent, and treasure mantra, at the end of the day, I guess I just hope that people will remember me and say, she tried to help me, or she was nice to me, or she gave me encouragement, or she showed me how to have fun in a stressful work environment, or how to just be myself, because I don't think that you can really be anybody else but yourself. And I think that people that know me would tell you that I'm very authentic, whether that's good or bad. So I hope that that's left a legacy to other people to be themselves and realize that, it's the most rewarding when you can really be who you are. And it's been really, really fun. It's been a terrific ride, and I hope to continue to try to push good things out into the world. So thank you, Margaret, for asking me to share some thoughts today, and appreciate everybody's attention. Thank you. Bye-bye.